All right, hello. Welcome to another episode of Poetry Square with me, Simon J, and we have the wonderful Mitchel Platt with us this week.
Howdy.
How are we, Mitchell?
I'm very well. All the best for seeing you, Si.
Oh, thank you very much, sir. He's very good to me, you know. Right, we're here to, well, we'll talk about a couple of things, really. Like you're the founder of YoYo Groceries.
I am.
How would you describe YoYo Groceries?
We deliver like natural organic food in packaging that people return to be reused.
There we go. So we're going to talk a little bit about that, and within that, your passion, would you like, for sustainable packaging.
Yeah, and sustainable living and sustainable food and the whole system, yeah, for sure.
Excellent. Well, let's get cracking. So I did a little bit of research before coming on. I looked at your website and I came across your packaging page, which talks about, I'm going to get this right, high density polyethylene.
Polyethylene, yeah.
Polyethylene, there we go. 95% there. Yeah, that's like a specific kind of plastic, right?
Correct.
That is seen as at the moment, would it be correct to say that's the best plastic we have on the market to package things in?
So I don't think there's such a thing as a best plastic for packaging. In fact, I don't think there's a best material full stop, right? Like what is really important when we're looking at materials is the use case. So, you know, it might be the case that PET which is the other. So HDPE and PET are the two kind of plastics that you and I will use in our everyday lives. Certainly with plastic bags. And, you know, they have different use cases. So sometimes one might be more appropriate because it has better moisture barriers. One of them is more durable. So, you know, it really depends on what exactly you're doing in any given time. The reason that we liked HDPE was because it's a little bit more flexible than PET. And that meant that in terms of durability, which is really important for us, like we want the bags not just to be reused once, we want them to be reused many, many times. That flexibility ensures that will happen.
Okay. And that reusability, again, most people know that plastics are bad for the planet. We're not going to go too much into why that is. But I think if we accept that people know that, then the reusing plastics rather than throwing them away, that seems to be the thing now because of landfill and incineration, right?
I would challenge that plastics are bad. I would actually say that plastics are very good. Again, it's about the use case. So in a single-use environment, plastics are not very good because they are durable and they don't, you know, they're very difficult to break down and recycle. But in a reuse environment, plastic is fantastic because for exactly the same reasons, right? It's durable. It's you know, it can be designed to be used many times. I mean, it's also low cost, low carbon, hygienic. You know, in a reuse scenario, you know, paper would be totally rubbish. In fact, paper as a material for groceries is pretty rubbish. I mean, if you went on our packaging page, you'll see that that's actually where we started our journey. We were using paper because we thought that was a really sustainable way of doing things. To caveat, my background is not in packaging and groceries, so I came in this, you know, pretty naive. And yeah, we started with paper, quickly kind of moved on to fabric, so cotton and jute.
And why is paper not the best?
So, number one, it can only be reused. It can only be used once, often, because afterwards, it breaks. I mean, well, often during use it breaks, right? And ultimately, what is the purpose of packaging? To protect the product inside. So if it breaks, it fundamentally doesn't achieve its primary objective. And there is a lot more what we call embedded carbon in food, in products, than there is often in the packaging, right? Packaging makes up a fraction of the overall emissions of whatever it is that you're buying, right? So if the packaging doesn't protect the product inside, it's not fit for purpose. So that's why. The other problem is with paper is that, it comes often from virgin sources. So, we're cutting down trees, that, like, if the more, the less, like woodland, in fact, a lot of compostable, like seaweed and these other, sustainable materials that we're starting to make packaging out of, you are basically, they can embed carbon in them. If you're cutting down a forest, that forest was breathing in carbon. So there's an carbon sequestration, carbon sequestration.
Okay.
I'm not saying
Sounds
that right.
Like a new word for me.
It's basically where carbon is absorbed into an environment, right?
Okay. So
you're cutting down those things.
Is significantly less with plastic compared to, say, paper.
Well, paper not hugely, but like glass, metal, massive. So like there's some really interesting products in the marketplace at the minute where like the glass bottle, the Milkman, like the classic. Some companies now are actually switching to plastic for those bottles, which customers initially are a bit like you, thinking, oh, this is really bad. But it's like, actually, to make one glass bottle, you can make 100 plastic bottles, like in terms of the equivalent carbon to manufacture. And then, to transport it, you've got a fraction of the cost because it's a fraction of the weight. And then it doesn't break. So, if you drop a glass bottle, you lose the contents inside. So again, it's all about, I wouldn't say there's like a material, I don't like to villainize specific materials. I think it's all about context and about their use. But what I would villainize is single use, right? Why are we using something once and throwing it away?
Sure. I get you. Have you seen that Coca-Cola documentary on YouTube? I don't know, there's one around like the huge amount of impact that Coca-Cola have as a single company.
I assume this is not one that they've made.
It's not one that they've made, no. And I got some stats from that. I don't know if you saw it. There's the first scene, it's in Hawaii, and they've got all this like rubbish coming on the beach. And those shots for me are just like so heartbreaking.
Yeah.
And that's where I don't know much about the ins and outs, the science of it. But for me, just seeing a chimney or seeing those scenes, immediately, well, this is obviously wrong, isn't it?
And it wasn't how it was, this wasn't how this stuff initially started. So, I mean, Coca-Cola are a really good example of, their business has been around for a long time. And when, in the 50s, they had the Coca-Cola man. And this was an individual, not necessarily a man, who went around and collected the used bottles because they were all glass, right? And back then, their packaging was treated as an asset. The beautiful silhouette. I mean, it's still iconic
it's a
today.
Sexy bottle, right?
Yeah. And I mean, that's what they still use. Even when they're selling the plastic bottle, it's still the silhouette of the glass, right? And it became ubiquitous with Coke, right? Like that bottle and all, and then in the late 50s, early 60s, when they realised actually there was enormous amount of operating cost having these individuals driving around in the Coca-Cola vans, picking up all the empties, that whole reuse system, what's way cheaper is to let somebody else deal with your waste, right? Yeah. And especially if that person is not you, which, Coca-Cola have never done that, right? Or, when we were singling out a brand, but like, Unilever, PepsiCo, like none of these people, they just in this linear system, it's like you make, use, dispose, and disposal normally is shouldered by local authorities, councils, our council tax, and that's fantastic because you basically you privatize the profits and socialize the cost.
Yes, exactly. It's like zero responsibility, and maximise your profits. It was like 200,000 in 2017. Coca-Cola, and we are singling them out, I guess, for this one. Other huge packaging corporations.
No, they are the single largest polluter, though. So
200,000 plastic bottles a minute they were creating.
Yeah,
and like something like I think 20 million tons of waste a year. Or took plastic. And I get it's like they are providing
it's a lot more than 20 million tons, but
yeah, maybe 200. It can't be right. They're a huge company, right? So they are obviously providing a service for a lot of people, but still, it's a huge amount of plastic, and with very little. It's this disposable thing, isn't it? Right, where we just like throw away stuff, and it's going to be someone else to look after it or take care of it. Which I assume that's why, in some ways, you've taken this as something to get involved in, is to address that issue.
Absolutely. So for a long time, I was part of a system where we were enabling, encouraging people just to buy more stuff, and that felt good for a long time, and then it didn't. Although I think for me personally, that's never been like my personal consumption. Isn't it? Like I'm not buying stuff all the time. I'm not scrolling through Instagram being like, oh, that looks good. It's only 20 quid. I'll have it delivered next day or whatever. Mm-hmm. Like that's never. I've been a bit more of a conscious consumer than that, I think, always. But I probably wasn't enabling that in my kind of work life. And then when the pandemic hit, I think that was a bit of a reset for me. A bit cliched, isn't it? Because I know it was for loads of people, but whatever. I'm not, that's fine. And I think that that time for me was like, what am I doing? What is going on in the world? And reuse and refill was something that I was doing personally, in like local shops. And I wanted to make that more accessible for everyone. I'm very lucky. We live in inner city London. There are shops where you can take your jars and put some rice in it, but like most people don't have access to that. So that was where the initial idea came from. It's like, right, can we put this online and then do it in a way that makes it accessible for people who don't live near these shops.
Yeah. And then compared to other countries, I know Europe's a lot more switched on with this kind of stuff compared. How do you think the UK is faring compared to other countries?
Relative, in terms of
like the ability to find people like yourself that do the sustainable stuff and refills and things like that.
I think there are some countries that have better like food cultures than us, certainly in like Western Europe. But I don't think a lot. I think there's other parts of the world which have got it a lot worse. I think like North America is pretty backwards with this. I think though a lot of what we sell, which is like dried food, so rice, beans, nuts, lentils, that kind of stuff. Almost all of that now is purchased in predefined single-use plastic because of the convenience, the hygiene, the cost. Like it's very, very straightforward. If you're doing it at scale, to make that single use. It is much more complicated to do it in a way where you have to put the food in the jars. I mean, can you imagine on a busy Saturday afternoon in a Tesco Extra, the big Tesco? I don't know if you've had the misfortune of going to one of these stores on a busy shopping day. The idea, the notion that you would be able to put gravity dispensers and have 10,000 people every day refill. I mean, it just wouldn't work, right? Like people want to be in and out.
So are you positive about it? Because it sounds from that you don't see, you've certainly got not a utopian view of the future. Do you think how realistic do you think scaling what you do or having that as like the model is?
So we don't let customers refill their own containers. We have our own packaging, which we supply to customers for them to refill at home. So our model would ostensibly be the same as it is today. You would go to the supermarket, you'd take your bag, but the difference is that when you go back to the supermarket, you take that bag back and then put it through like a reverse vending machine, much like in continental Europe where they have almost the whole of Europe. And I saw these machines in the Czech Republic in 2009, where you buy a beer and then you put it through the little tunnel, and then it spits out your deposit, and then you can get your money back.
Yeah.
That would be the model. So I don't believe in-store refill is a scalable solution.
Realistic.
I think it has a place. If I'm in a I'm going to Cornwall next week. If I spot a refill shop on the high street, I'm going to go in. I'm going to buy some bits. I mean,
You'll support.
I support, and I think that shopping with these shops is not just putting money into local people. It's a vote for reuse and refill. Right? I'm saying I don't want this rice from Tesco's. Right? I want to get my stuff with my own jar.
Absolutely. And there's something quite satisfying I found. Like when I was in Honor Oak not too long ago, there was a refill store that I'd go to, and it was nice. Like you go in with your little what used to be a jar of marmalade or what have you, and you get your shampoo in there or something. And it's like I quite like the quirkiness.
Mate, I love that. I love that.
Yeah. And there's something satisfying about it. As you say, there's the lack of waste.
And the one thing that we don't achieve, which you can achieve in store, is that, you know, if you want to do something niche, let's say you want black rice, right, really expensive, you want to make a special risotto, what you don't want to have is a massive bag of black rice, because ultimately that's going to lurk in the back of your cupboard for the next, or whatever, 6, 12, 24 months. What you can do in a refill shop is buy the 230 grams that you need for this special recipe and no more, right? And that's really cool.
Get it to order.
Nice. Exactly. And that's what I really liked about the shops. But and that's not something we like to solve. I've got some ideas, but we're not doing that. You know, at the minute we offer options, so you can buy 500 grams a kilo, 2.5 kilos of almost all the products that we sell, but you can't buy 230 grams.
Okay, so not quite yet.
Not yet.
Okay, coming soon. I wanted to broaden it out a little bit again to talk about the plastic and how, from what I've seen, it's looking pretty dire in terms of like plastic production in the world, and how that's like tripling, or like it's huge. It's just huge. When, you know, with all the information we have to hand, one might have thought that wouldn't be the case. What do you make of that, and do you know why that's happening?
Yeah, so look, the reason that plastic production is increasing exponentially is because, you know, population growth, and also, you know, as the global south increases in its wealth, whilst Western consumption is going down, you know, Vinted is now the most popular clothing shop in France, right?
Okay.
But like, that's not in other countries. They're spending at Primark because they've never had access to new clothes before, right? So like, there's an enormous swathes of the globe where consumption is really on the rise, and if they were to all live like we do in the UK, so
they're catching up still with that Western lifestyle, sort of
exactly
the path
right.
To
yeah,
the
it's
Western...
like aspirational North American bloody utopia.
Yes,
but like
throwaway society.
But that's why things are going up. In my opinion, the only way to reduce this, we cannot recycle our way out of this, right? Recycling is a very low in what we call the waste hierarchy, right? So like, really what you want to do is look at that and say, right, can I... Well, at the very top is rethink, right? So this is very big picture stuff. This is probably for like policymakers and government and stuff. Rethink, right? How do we actually say, right? A good example would be like electric car subsidies, right? Like, that's how we're going to get rid of combustion cars, by making, diesel and petrol really expensive, and electric, you don't pay road tax on electric cars. That would be a kind of rethink, idea. The next one is refuse. Like earlier I had a sandwich guy serving it to me, give me a fork. I don't need that. Say no. Stop. And if everybody said, how many plastic forks are given out every day that are unused, right? Yeah. The next one is reuse, right? So can you reuse things? If everybody reused their stuff more, and longer in use is part of reuse as well. Do I need to replace this T-shirt, or can I keep it for the next 10 years, or do you know what I mean? Like, and then further down is recycle. Like, that's when something's come to the end of its life, really, and we want to repurpose it and change it. And then we've got rubbish, and right at the bottom of that.
There's a huge there's a myth, isn't there, around recycling? I saw it's 9% of all plastic's been recycled so far.
Yep.
Hence why you're using a sustainable plastic, or reusing it as much as possible, which is like, we're all urged to recycle so much. So I'll ask you a little controversial question. What would you say to people about like general waste and recycling? Is there any point in trying to recycle stuff?
Definitely do recycle. So soft plastics, which is what you're talking about, are notoriously difficult to recycle. Often they're really small. They're like got they're quite difficult to tell the difference. So like, I was saying the difference between HDPE and PET. So the difference between high density, that's high density polyethylene, and PET is, oh goodness, I'm having a bit of brain fog. My baby's been kept me up since. PET, I can't remember. Basically, but they're like, you and I wouldn't be able to tell the difference, right? Like some machines can, but like when you're dealing with loads of it, so it becomes all a bit muddled and suddenly you can't recycle that very easily. But things like metal's really good at recycling. These recycling centres, they've got big old magnets that pull out metal and they get, that. So it's about the sorting and the separation, which is really difficult with recycling. But things are really improving, and it's getting better and better all the time. And what I would say is that recycling is better than, chucking stuff in the bin, because basically, certainly in this country and in a lot of kind of, Western Europe now, we are just burning that. What I would really discourage people to do, and this is something that I really see a lot, is what we call wish cycling. Right. This is where you think something be recycled, but actually it can't. So the classic example would be like pizza box, right? So your pizza box, once it's got oil on it, once oil is saturated into the paper, into that wood pulp, into the fibers, they can't separate that. So that box is now only good for the bin. So you can't put that into recycling. And then the problem is, if that gets into the recycling, and then it can end up actually contaminating the recycling, and then a whole load more, paper and card that would otherwise be recycled, then all goes to go into the bin. So what do I say? Definitely recycle. But do it diligently, and I know
make sure things are well. It's difficult sometimes, I find, or like to clean things, or
that's another one actually. Don't clean stuff in fresh water ever.
Right. Okay.
Because
why so?
Just when at the end, because you're basically, that's throwing good after bad, right? So fresh water is the most valuable, one of the most valuable commodities we have. People in drought-ridden countries would literally fight over fresh water, and we're using it to wash out a can of chopped tomatoes before we put it in the recycling. What I would implore people to do is give it a little rinse at the end, when you're done with your dishwasher, your washing bowls. When it's really nasty at the end.
Just save that for the tomato tin.
So use that for your tins. Definitely. Nice. And same for all. So don't throw good after bad, and just diligently separate. But you do need to rinse stuff before it goes in, because again, if there's loads of food in the recycling stuff, it can contaminate it.
Excellent. And that reminds me of when I was at the Buddy Centre, which you supply, right, still? And they do, their lady who was there, she was like the manager, she was very, very like on the zero carbon emissions, vegan, everything like that. And she'd tell us like, yeah, exactly, she's your girl, right? And she would say to us, like, if you're going to wash something out, like, don't spend 5 minutes washing out, because like the 10 litres of water you've just used has got more carbon footprint than that tiny bit of cellophane or whatever. Which I was like, oh yeah, I hadn't thought of it like that. So yeah, be diligent with your
really
water use.
It's really difficult, right? And I think
being mindful, isn't it? Right? It's exactly. Really having like just being conscious of what you're doing.
Yeah, I think being mindful is exactly it, right? And it's easy. Look, and sometimes whatever, if you're knackered or there's other stuff going on, do you know what I mean? It's all right to sometimes make those mistakes. But I think if you're generally just being a bit process driven about it, and like I say, not using fresh water to clean out recycling is for me, that's low hanging fruit.
Cool, nice. Well, let's talk a bit more about YoYo Groceries again. So you're based in East London, right?
In Leighton.
And people, so are you really serving the London community?
No, we serve nationwide. So
nationwide,
So I mean, we have a lot of customers in London for sure, and we have a lot of business customers. So like we deliver to a lot of offices. So like healthy, nutritious snacks, that kind of stuff. If you're lucky enough to work for an organisation that treats you like that,
cares about their staff.
And then we send out whatever, like a yoke of goodies via Royal Mail pretty much every day now.
Okay.
So they go all over the country.
You can deliver anywhere in the UK, right?
Yeah.
All the way up beyond the Hadrian's Wall,
yeah,
do you go?
Yeah,
Okay.
We go out to Hebrides, we go Channel Islands, we do British territories overseas.
The Commonwealth.
If Royal Mail delivers there.
Okay, you're there.
Yeah,
right, very good. Excellent. So one delivery at a time, right?
That's it.
I wanted to mention, I remember I came to your warehouse, right? Been a couple of years ago now, almost.
We're in a new place now, but...
Oh, are you?
Yeah.
Okay.
Across the road, though, still in the same...
What I want to know is, are you still doing those organic apricots from Austria?
Oh, no. Well, they're Turkish.
Oh, they're Turkish?
Yeah. No, we do pumpkin seeds from Austria.
Oh, is that what
it was? Yeah, you might have mixed those two up.
I might have mixed them up, because I remember the apricot, and it was so delicious. Yeah. Well, so this is amazing. Like, I want to say this about YoYo Groceries, which was zero waste foods at the time, right?
Yeah.
You've changed because zero waste doesn't exist, right? That was the thinking, was it?
Yeah, I think it's a bit virtue signalling as well, like a bit to what I was going to about, like I think with this stuff, like you don't want to be like, if you use a bit of water to wash out your tin, do you know what I mean? You don't need to be too overkill about it. It's like we will do the best that we can, right?
Yeah.
And I think that. Well, the best that we know, like a lot of it is ignorance, right? And but I think that zero waste as a concept for me just didn't really. It felt like a bit too hard, like a bit too aspirational.
Sure.
And also a bit virtue signalling. It's like and we do make waste, right? Of course,
yeah,
we
exactly.
do. Like,
You can't. There's no zero with anything, right?
No, exactly.
But I do want to mention the organic stuff, like when the stuff you're producing, or rather bringing in. It's like the difference really is there, because you're not just about the packaging, are you? You're about the organic quality, beans, pulses, ethical fruit, and there really is a difference between that and the supermarket.
100%. You can absolutely taste the difference, and I mean So when you came in, the stars of the show for me are the apricots always, because the way that they're different from the supermarket ones is that. So normally the supermarket ones are like bright orange, and it's because they're treated with sulfur dioxide, which is a preservative, which gives them great shelf life. It also makes them look a bit more appetizing because they're like orange rather than like a bit of a brown. Like they arguably don't look as nice.
Kind of like gnarly, aren't they? Almost.
They can look a little bit
worn, leathered.
Like warty, shall we say?
Okay.
But they and they also can be a bit tough. Like they're not soft necessarily. They usually are, but they can sometimes have a bit of a tough exterior. Whilst the sulfur dioxide solves all those issues, but primarily it basically means they can sit on the shelf for a very, very long time.
Right.
But sulfur dioxide also just eradicates all the flavour. The flavour of the untreated organic apricots is just out of this world.
Yeah.
And it's the same with the pumpkin seeds. So. Most pumpkin seeds come from China, which is quite surprising considering, like we have loads of pumpkins in this country. Like we tend to carve them up and just toss the inners out, sadly.
Even the pumpkin seeds are made in China.
Mate, it's mad, isn't it? But yeah, the Austrian ones, they are famous because they're bigger. They're much bigger than the normal seeds, and it means they've got a better body to flesh ratio, which means they're really nice and creamy. And they are not to be missed. They're actually one of my favourites.
There you go.
Yeah.
As a top tip. Well, I think we're coming to the end of this. Been good to see you, man. Love it to have you on.
Thank you very much.
Have you got a takeaway message for the people watching this about the environment in particular that you could bestow?
Yeah, I would say, look, don't, do what you can. Don't be disheartened by what you can't. Like for example, shopping with us. Unfortunately, we've got big dreams to make what we do like more accessible and more affordable in the future. But like what we do at the minute is we sell like quite expensive food. So like if you can't afford to shop with us or other zero waste shops, because again a lot of them are selling really high. Don't worry about that. Like that's not something you can do. That's a a kind of societal problem, right, that we have, and I think that, but do your little bits, do what you can, and go out and protest, and that's how we're going to make change happen all together. But yeah, don't sweat the details, because it's not on us as individuals.
Nice. Mr. Mitch, thank you very much, sir.
Pleasure.